Hey everybody, welcome to another World of Tanks replay, and in this one I'm playing my Wheezy 120, platooned up with MSEC in the Cent 71 and Viet Camper in the T54. Now I am absolutely certain I already recorded this match, but I can't seem to find the video. I didn't upload it, I can't find it in my usual video folder, so I don't know what happened. If I recall correctly, I got a phone call partway through recording it, so I went back to re-record it. Now, whether I did or not, I'm not sure. But in any case, you'll have to bear with me. Sometimes I tend to forget where I put things. In any case, we are on the south spawn of Malinovka. And so, despite my lack of gun depression, I'm actually going to head for the hill anyway. You can still do some decent work up there with the Wheezy 120. You just need to know how to use it. Right away, the entire enemy team just about is spotted by our 1390. Looks like the majority of them are actually staying in their base, which is good news, because if they keep staying in their base, words are hard, it'll give us a good chance to take control of the top of the hill, and if we take control of the top of the hill, we've basically won the match. It's very difficult to lose a match on Malinovka if you've taken the hill. Of course it can happen, and I'm sure I've got videos up where it does happen, because pubbies will somehow achieve the impossible, but only in a bad way. Viet is leading the charge at the moment. He'll get up the top of the hill first and see what we're fighting, and MSEC's lagging a little behind for obvious reasons. The Cent's not quite as fast as this thing, and it looks like he's got some support there as well from our STB. Our tank destroyers are mostly staying in base, not necessarily a bad plan, and our heavies are staying further down the hill in the forest, which is a bad plan, but they might get away with it. Viet doesn't see anybody yet, so I decide to push aggressively and get into the bushes up ahead. I just hesitate for a second there to make sure nothing does get lit, and then move up. Enemy Leopard prototype is in a position to shoot us in the side, so I want to stay to the right, where the hill covers me from him. And then we see the AMX-30. Viet gets a shot in, I manage to bounce one. Now the AMX-30 is an annoying target to engage from the front. Its cupola is... well, I mean, it's not really a weak spot because the entire tank is a weak spot, but it has such a large gun mantlet that if you can only see the turret, you kind of have to shoot for the cupola, and if you hit it at a bad angle, you'll bounce like I did. Speaking of bad angles, there's that shot. Looks like it deviated a little high into the E5's upper plate. And although I have got some bushes here as camouflage, the enemy can see me. So I pull back a little to get unspotted. As do the mediums behind me. Looks like our heavies are actually starting to move up the hill though, so we'll have some support here in a minute. And unfortunately for me, the relatively slow aim time and poor accuracy of the Wheezy 120's gun are coming into play here. Now, while the gun can certainly hit a tank at pretty much any range you need it to, it's more difficult to try and pick out weak spots, particularly small weak spots like the cupola of an E5 or an AMX-30. The E5's cupola adds in the additional problem that the front of it's quite well sloped, so you have to hit it in exactly the right spot or you'll bounce anyway. And that shot sails clean over the top. Now, of course, I was also struggling with a relatively jumpy ping that was kind of bouncing between 220 and 270. Makes it difficult to get a steady aim on things that are moving. Our E4 charges forwards, so I take the opportunity to follow in a little. Go for a shot on the Ferdinand, and finally I get my first damaging shot of the game. Nearly 4 minutes into it. Or in fact, over 4 minutes into it. There's no point shooting the cupola of an E3, so I don't bother. The cupola of an E3 is as well armoured as anywhere else on its front. There's no point shooting it, it is not a weak spot. What is a weak spot is the lower plate, which he is obligingly showing me, and I did switch to heat there just to make sure. So although our E4 is paying dearly for his aggressiveness, it is buying me the opportunity to get some shots in without getting return fire from the enemy tanks. That was never likely to hit. So I pull back a little to try and get unspotted again. Now there is still a fair amount of hit points in front of us. That E100 in particular can be a real big problem, so I switch to heat to engage him. His hull down, I'm going to need heat to reliably punch through his turret face, and because I'm in a Wheezy 120 I can't rely on pushing up to the edge of the hill and shooting down at his lower plate. I'd have to expose my entire tank to do it because of my lack of gun depression. RE100 charges in front of me and absorbs a whole bunch of shells. And he begins pushing on these guys who are withdrawing slightly down the hill. It looks like they're trying to get support from the Ferdinand and the AMX, as well as the Leopard. So I stay to the right here, where those can't hit me, and roll up. And you can see I'm struggling with the gun depression here, trying to get a shot on the E100, but I do get one off. The enemy AMX-30 finally goes down, cleaned up by our LTTB. And now I do have a little bit of hold down to work with here as I try and clean these guys up. Fire at the IS-8 and pull back into cover. Our team's got this pretty much in hand, but I don't want to throw away my tank just yet. I go for the IS-8, he's showing me the flat side of his pike, making him an easy target. And I've also still got AP loaded, so I want to deal with him with AP and then go to maybe heat for the E100, depending on what angles he gives me. In the event, our E100 takes care of the enemy E100, so I no longer have any reason to bother loading heat. And with just 64 hit points, I now start looking for shots on the Leopard and the AMX. Now the Leo didn't actually see me there, curiously enough. Now, he is a fair distance away, but still, firing a gun this big in the open, you would expect to be spotted. And I'm going to attribute that one to my 4-skill crew with camo and also my camo paint. On the other hand, he may well have been running without optics or binoculars. And I was right on the edge of his view range anyway. Down goes the Leopard, down goes the AMX. All that's left is the enemy Lorraine, who has been apparently camping in their base the whole time, and the enemy JT, who was last seen out in the south of the field. There's still no reason to throw away my tank here, so I pull up to a firing position on the hill and wait for something to get lit, while Viet charges in and spots for me, and I'm able to finish off the Lorraine. JT pulls in behind a rock, but he's about to be taken care of, and sure enough, down he goes. It's a win for us. Pretty convincing win at that. Nice cruisy game. Did throw away a few more hit points than I needed to, and a lot of my shots at the start of the game were pretty ropey. Maybe I should have repositioned, maybe I should have waited for better shots. Who knows? But at the end of the day, I was able to keep my hit points just long enough to get some actual work done. And this is, I think, a pretty decent show of one of the downsides of the Wheezy 120, or two of the downsides in fact, one of them being its lack of gun depression, which makes fighting in certain terrain very difficult, and the other one being its gun. Now, while its gun is fantastically powerful and relatively accurate, I'll get back to that in a second, it does have rather poor aim time even with a GLD, and vert stab installed and crew skills, and as well as that, it also just doesn't have the best base accuracy. Now, when I say it's relatively accurate, it's got pretty good effective accuracy, and its effective accuracy is kind of like effective DPM, I think, whereas you can have the best DPM in the world, but if you can't actually apply it, it's useless. Similarly, effective accuracy is basically your accuracy compared to your ability to actually kill things. So, say you've got, I don't know, a Panther in a tier 9 game fighting a ST1 frontally. You know, you might have a super accurate tank, but it's pretty useless because even if you can pick him apart through his weak spots, it's going to take you a long time to kill him, and you're probably going to bounce anyway. Whereas the the Wheezy 120 has a relatively high pen gun with a lot of power behind it, so it doesn't matter really where you hit an enemy tank, because as long as you can hit that enemy tank, you're probably going to do some damage to it. Obvious exceptions are the frontal aspect of some of the more heavily armoured tanks, but frontally against basically any medium, the side aspect of any tank in the game, even the mouse, you're going to pen it. So it's got relatively high accuracy in that regard. Even at maximum range, you're still probably going to hit the tank, and if you hit the tank, you'll probably pen it. But when it comes to picking apart weak spots at long range or hitting moving cupolas over the top of a hill, it just doesn't have that accuracy. A Centurion, of course, is another tank with a good degree of accuracy in that not only is the gun accurate itself, but it also tends to pen everything it hits, much like the Wheezy 120 does. And then you've got tanks like the M46, which has really quite terrible accuracy to start with, and then also tends not to pen things unless you're firing gold. So there's a lot of things in this game that people make a big fuss out of, accuracy, DPM, alpha, all this stuff. It doesn't really matter unless you can apply it. So you've got to look at the context of these things as well when you're trying to weigh up the advantages and disadvantages of a certain tank. And it can change based on the situation. For example, if you're fighting an E100 frontally at long range, the Wheezy 120 is basically useless. Whereas if you're fighting it side-on at long range, the Wheezy 120 is fantastic, because you're pretty much going to pen it no matter where you hit, and you're going to do a lot of damage each time. And so I guess ultimately the lesson to take away from this is the same lesson to take away when you look at tanks. Historically speaking, tanks don't fight 1 versus 1 on a billiard table. You have to take into account the terrain they're fighting in, the tactical situation, and in the case of real-world scenarios, you've got to take into account the supporting arms as well: infantry, artillery, air support, reconnaissance, deception measures, all of that. And so don't fall into the trap of trying to treat tanks as if hard stats and soft stats and all this bullshit is the be-all end-all, because it really isn't. You have to look at the sort of big picture of it much more than you look at the sort of billiard table view, which is useless. It kind of draws people into ridiculous conclusions and complacency, and we all know what happens when you get complacent. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and my little rant. This one was chronologically before a lot of the most recent videos that I've uploaded. It was more around the same place from other Wheezy 120 games, I think. It doesn't really matter, who cares. It's not like there's some overarching plot line, so it doesn't matter if they're out of order a bit. I don't know what happened to the original recording of this, but oh well. In any case, I've still got some more World of Tanks replays coming of my own, then I've got some more from other goons, and then I've got a couple of pretty good World of Warships games I want to get up, but I'm kind of racing the patches at this point because the next World of Warships patch has been announced, and I think Tanks is getting patched pretty soon as well, so I've got to try and get all of these replays done before they patch so I can actually play the games on patch day. Anyway, as ever, I wish you the best of luck in the field, and I'll see you on the next video.